Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be painting up the unit of Praetors and the Knight-Vexillor. Now, I already went through and assembled everything. It's not that big of an issue. There's no real trouble or problems trying to put them all together, and they're pushed to fit basically, so you're going to have to fully assemble them anyway. I took some milliput because there were some pretty big gaps with the some capes and stuff. So after applying it on there, I then took a wet brush, just a spare brush, and I just basically sanded the milliput smooth until it blended perfectly with the surrounding area. Now I'm going to try something different. With general purpose black Bright Touch primer, I'm going to prime the models. I wanted to do this as a part of the pre-coating since we're using a lot of translucent colors, and so this will be the dark underside, and then I will prime it or prep it with other colors after the fact. The problem is this is a bit glossy for some reason, and the paint has a little trouble adhering to it. Sad. And now with Pallid Witch Flesh and White Scar, we are going to continue priming these models. I'm going to use Pallid Witch Flesh through an airbrush and basically do the highlights from the upper raised areas. I'm going to point the airbrush basically at a 45-degree angle upper to paint down to create the lights, and then I will take White Scar White with the dry brush, and I will basically dry brush all the raised areas and points to make them stand out even more. Alright, I'm going to take Liquitex Acrylic Ink Burnt Sienna, or Transparent Burnt Sienna, and Runefeng Steel Air from the Citadel color line. And normally I would do this 1-to-1, but I put a little bit extra of the Liquitex color in to try to make it more brown. It just made it more runny, more watery, so ignore that. And then I painted it, all the gold pieces with it. Now, one thing I'll note while you see it being painted in the background, when I mixed in the extra, it made it a bit more watery and a bit too transparent. So 1-to-1, or at least until you get the brown color mixed as dark as it's going to be, that's fine. You don't want to lose that certain consistency. And as far as I can tell, one layer is good enough because you could see the light silver in a lot of the details and raised areas, and I went and applied a second layer after the fact, and that ruined the light silver color. So I basically undid the highlight, and by 2 coats I just made it a plain 1 coat, which completely undid all the pre-highlighting and stuff. However, because the black undercoat in the shadows, I had to apply 2 layers in some places simply because the paint just didn't stick. So learned that lesson. And now with Liquitex Carbon Black and Liquitex Cerulean Blue Hue and the Runefeng Steel Air, not the regular Runefeng Steel Air, we're going to do the metal. Now, I mixed up a bunch of the Runefeng Steel and then a little bit of the Carbon Black, not even a full drop. I dropped the drop somewhere else, and then I took scoops of it from the brush in to mix it in, and then added a little bit of blue into it to add some color, some bluish hue. And so what I did with all these silver metals is that I started off with this darkest layer, and then once that was done, I took that and added more silver into it. Or I added silver in a different spot and then dragged the previous mix in to lighten it, and I basically kept doing highlights. Around 3 highlights total, the dark base layer, and once that dried, a secondary layer, and once that dried, a third layer. And then finally I did a highlights with the pure Runefeng Steel on the very edges of blades, the most raised areas, picking out details and such, and it looks good. It has a nice color, a nice transition on some spots. With cerulean blue hue from Liquitex, and of course the Rune Fang Steel, I just mix a very small amount of this and just apply it on the shoulder pad. Unfortunately, I cannot get any darker color blue of the Liquitex ink, so I'm stuck with this light blue color. Now with transparent burnt sienna and carbon black in small amounts, I put very little carbon black in, less than a drop in. I basically made this bronze-like color, and then I applied it onto the handles of their weapons to make it look like a metallic bronze handle. It looks pretty good. It's distinctly different from their gold armor. And now with cerulean blue hue Liquitex ink and Pallid Witchflesh and Lamian medium, we're going to paint the standard bearer. So with Pallid Witchflesh as a base with a little bit of Lamian medium mixed in. I want to get like a Pallid Witchflesh air eventually, but for now this is what we got. And then with the acrylic blue ink mixed in a bit, we're going to apply this. I probably maybe should have skipped the Lamian medium entirely. The Pallid Witchflesh was good enough in consistency because it was really watered down with the acrylic ink, and so it flowed well. And just again, if I had a darker blue acrylic ink, I would have used that. With Pyro Red Liquitex ink, transparent burnt umber, Pallid Witchflesh, and Lamian medium, we're going to try something. So I mix up the Pallid Witchflesh and Lamian medium as a start. Then I add some of the burnt umber to make it a brown. And once it's as brown as it's going to be, I then want to add a little bit of red into it. But so there are these backpacks that they have, so I decided to separate a little bit of it and add more brown and try to apply it onto the packs on the soldiers. And while it's a darker brown, it really didn't turn out too well. I should have just used regular basic Citadel. It was just an experiment. And then I took the red and brown, and then I painted these ropes that are on the soldiers. I ended up with like around 2 coats of this. Probably the Lamian medium diluted it too much, and if I didn't have that in, the paint would have been fine, just as is. And now with Steel Legion Drab, Rakkarth Flesh, Averland Sunset, Ulthuan Grey, and the camera cut it off, but Pallid Witchflesh, we're going to do a bunch of small details. So with Rakkarth Flesh, with Steel Legion Drab, we're going to paint all the satchels. This is a better color. We're just going to do 1 coat. We're going to trust it on the washes later to make it good. And with Rakkarth Flesh, we're going to paint all the banners. How do I put it? The things coming from their weapons, flowing through, stuff like that. With Averland Sunset, we're going to do the details on the banner. And with Ulthuan Grey, we're going to paint the inside of the cloaks. Just mental note that you're going to have to do around 2 coats of this, partially because of the black undercoating. I just can't really grasp paint that well, so I'm going to have to do it twice. And then finally we go to Pallid Witchflesh on the cloaks, where we will basically paint with the parts that are more out in the open, closest to light, as well as some marks onto the banner. And with Dark Reaper, painting the stones, sand, and rocks the guys stand on. Alright, with Calidor Sky and Hoeth Blue, we're going to paint the cloaks. We're going to start off with Calidor Sky as a base. Then we're going to take a 1-to-1 mix of Calidor Sky and Hoeth Blue, watered down with a little bit of Lamian medium, and we're going to try to highlight this. This didn't go well. Yeah, it really didn't. So then I tried something. I took the Calidor Sky, mixed it with Lamian medium and a little bit of carbon black. to create a wash. It didn't work out. I had to use a lot of Lamy and medium, which I'm running out of now, and it just didn't do well. It ended up being terrible. There's no saving it. So I started over. I repainted all the cloaks with Calidor Sky as a base. Then I took Lamy and medium and mixed it with the whatchamacallit, the Hoeth blue. We're gonna go for high contrast changes. The Lamy and medium will help it smooth out more. And so with one coat of the Hoeth blue with close to 1-to-1 Lamy and medium, we're just gonna paint all the edges and the upper raised areas of the cloaks. And once that dries, we will then do the same thing a second time on the most raised areas. The Lamy and medium will make it dilute a bit, so when we apply multiple coats, it'll get brighter naturally. And well, that's the best I could do. Alright, with some mineral spirits or odorless paint thinner, mineral spirits, and high quality Winsor & Newton oil color, burnt umber, we're going to make a wash, a very thick wash, and we're just going to coat everything in it. And just heavy coating of it. And I basically left it for an hour so that the paint would dry a bit more, so that when I removed it, some of it would be rough to stick and wouldn't easily flow out. Alright, so here's the thing. That was a bad idea. I think maybe around 45 minutes would have been better because it adhered too well that there were some places it was very difficult to get off, and I ended up like sanding it a lot and caused a lot of damage to the paint underneath because the odorless paint thinner weakens the paint, so gotta just time that right. Alright, so what I do is I take one of the sponges and I cut it into a bunch of smaller pieces so that it can fit in the nooks and crannies of the model without like damaging or ruining something. This is a double-edged sword. While the smaller pieces are able to be used for more precise removal, because they're so small, they sort of lack this spongy spine, which allows you to put more pressure on some areas. And so, there's a balance to find there. And then when removing the actual stuff, so some things were easier to remove than others. Some things it was good that it baked into, like the lettering, that was good. But some stuff, like the banner, that stuff was baked onto it because it was on there for so long that it was pretty hard to remove, and I had to use some mineral spirits and a brush to help try to remove the most from the banner. That probably should have been removed towards the beginning. Now with Liberator Gold, we're just going to go back and with a fine brush, we're just going to paint the highlights, the edges of pieces of armor, upper raised areas, stuff like that, just to add more shine and gold to it, to make him stand out. I then took Baneblade Brown and then just used it to fix the banners and stuff, because this now matched the color, because the inks or the oils changed the overall color, and Baneblade Brown matched to fix some of the cracks and things like that and smooth things out. And then with AK Interactive Ultra Matte Varnish, we're going to apply this onto several cloth areas, the robes, banners, and the bases, which I made and painted just like the previous group, 3D printed and everything like that. And done. It's a mixed bag. Okay, so some things worked, some things didn't. Okay, clearly the black primer somehow was too glossy and made the paint difficult to adhere, so that caused me some trouble. Second thing that happened that was probably an issue was I could not paint those cloaks. Like, my goodness. Look at the artwork, and they're high contrast colors, which means like it goes from a very dark color to a very bright color very quickly, low transition. And I can understand why. There's really not much area or room for a color transition. Alright, so whatever. If I could do it again, I probably would airbrush the cloaks and paint those first before everything else. Oh well. If you also notice, the Knight-Vexillor sword is bent. Okay, so I use a hairdryer to heat up and rapidly dry paint so I can just move on without spending 10 to 15 minutes sitting staring at it for it to dry. And it almost never happens, but it slightly melted and warped the plastic on the sword. So that is a massive disappointment, selling him at a discount, or what I assume is a discount, because the problem with these box sets is you actually don't know what their prices of their models are. The banner is a mixed bag. I didn't paint the center symbol because it looked good. The cloth banners and stuff that are flowing in the wind, the oil wash made it look really good with the coloring and transition and stuff like that. If I was to do things again, probably one of the major things I would do is, instead of placing the wash on everything, I would probably just spot wash. Like, I would just take a thin brush and I would just apply the wash directly into specific areas. And I feel that would do a better job. Alright then, well, as far as the rating goes, I feel like I improved over the last ones. Clearly I didn't sabotage it with a poor priming. Debatable. The Knight-Vexillor got damaged. Some things look great, some things are meh. Alright, I'm probably going to give it a solid, I feel at best a 7 out of 10. Barely making it. It could more likely be a 6, but a 7 out of 10. Some things turned out really well, but it's more of an ensemble piece. I'm still learning, trying to work with this stuff. The metals on the axe heads look great, I will say that. Alright then, I guess I'll figure this out. So the next would be like 2 characters, and I would do them in the same video, but I think I'm actually going to do them each with their own video, because a lot can be made or lost based off the priming or the pre-painting and stuff. So I want to try some different things, and I don't want to do it all the same in one go and then end up screwing both. So the 2 characters that were going to be in one video, I'm going to make them separate simply so I can experiment more. Alright, like the video if you like the video, share it if you want to share it, comment if you want to comment, and I'll see you guys relatively soon. Bye.